Welcome to the lecture on energy and metabolism and also on enzymes. Let's go ahead and start with energy and metabolism. So what is energy? Energy is defined as the ability to do work. And this is life science, and so we're concerned about the work that cells and living organisms are performing. Even right now, as you're watching this, your cells are engaging in a number of actions that require energy. They're engaging in a number of actions that involve work. And so where do you get the energy? Well, you get it from your food. Where does your food get it from? The next slide that we're going to look at will trace energy back to the primary source for living organisms, which is the sun. But for now, let's talk about the forms of energy and how that relates to life. So, in simple terms, energy is going to be classified as either kinetic or potential energy. Kinetic energy being the energy of motion, potential energy being energy that something has based on its position. Energy, according to the first law of thermodynamics, cannot be created or destroyed, but it can change form readily. So energy that is potential can be converted to kinetic energy and vice versa. So let's go ahead and take a look here at an example using a dam. So if we have a dam right here, and I don't have a blue marker, so pretend that this is blue. All right, we've got a dam here with water held behind it. And over here, I'm going to show another dam with water held behind it as well. These two hypothetical dams both have potential energy in the water that's held behind them. But this one has a lot more potential energy than this one. Because of the higher height of the dam, there's more of a fall if the water were to break through, which means that there's more potential energy due to the height difference from where the water is and the ground below. Here, there's some potential energy, but it's a lot shorter drop, which means if this dam were to break, you'd have a lot less energy as the water cascaded over. When the water is held behind the dam, it is potential energy. And so when it breaks through the dam and goes over, that's the conversion from potential energy to the energy of motion, which is going to be kinetic energy. So a lot more potential energy. If you convert it, a lot more kinetic energy as it flows over the dam. Less potential energy, less kinetic energy if it flows over the dam. Either way, the energy is converted from potential to kinetic as the water would break through it. So potential energy has to do with the positioning of in this case, water, or in the case of what we're going to look at, atoms. And kinetic energy involves actual energy of motion. So let's go ahead then and relate this to life, starting with the picture above with all of those cheeseburgers and other food items. So these food items have energy stored within the chemical bonds that build them. That energy is called chemical energy. And it is a type of energy that is potential energy, which means that it's stored energy that has energy as a result of its position. In this case, it's the position of the atoms and the molecules within the food itself. So you eat one of these cheeseburgers, you are going to consume the protein, the carbs, and as you break it down, your body is going to release the potential energy stored within the bonds of the food itself. And then that energy is converted into energy that your body can actually do something with. So, chemical energy, a type of potential energy found in food. Another type of energy that we're going to look at a little bit later is heat energy, but I don't want to get into that one just yet. So if you're looking for the source of energy for food that you consume, you can trace it back to the sun. The sun gives off solar energy. You can't do anything with this, but plants can. Plants can take carbon dioxide in the air and use the solar energy to convert carbon dioxide into sugars. So plants can convert solar energy into chemical energy. And the energy is not created or destroyed by the plant, it is simply converted or harnessed in the form of chemical energy. And so that is how we get chemical energy for the food that we consume. So, living organisms must have a method of converting energy into a form that their cells can use. Plants are autotrophs, which means that they can convert solar energy into chemical energy. If you remember this word from several lectures ago, autotroph means self-feeding. And so organisms that are autotrophs can produce food, whereas organisms such as yourself, you are a heterotroph, which means feeding on another or others. And so you have to consume an organism that has already found a way to get energy. So plants, autotrophs, animals like yourself are heterotrophs. Okay. I don't believe we've talked about ATP much at all yet. If we have, we've barely touched on it. So we just showed that CO2 is converted into sugars. But in order for this to work, there are some more components that have to be present. And so here is the actual formula for what plants do. This is photosynthesis. And this involves taking water, carbon dioxide, and converting it to sugar and molecular oxygen. So this is the process that plants use, and of course this doesn't work unless you've got an influx of solar energy, because CO2 doesn't have much energy at all, chemical energy, and sugar has a lot. And so photosynthesis infuses our sugar here with solar energy, and this is the conversion formula for how that happens. So the plants make sugar. That's awesome. You are a heterotroph. You are going to eat this. You're going to eat the products that plants produce. And plants will also convert, then they'll make proteins, they'll make fats, they'll make complex carbs from these simple sugars. All of the stuff that plants produce, ultimately, this is how it started. So, you eat the products of plants, you consume the chemical energy that is stored in that sugar. Awesome. However, your cells can't directly use food as an energy source. So here's that up here. Energy in food is not directly usable by living organisms. So here are some fries. Fries have starch. Starch consists of a whole bunch of simple sugars linked together to form this long chain. You break down the starch. You've got sugars ready to go, full of energy. Your cells, though, they can't do anything with it. They just don't know how to use it. So you need a structure within your cells that is able to take the energy from food and convert it into a molecule that your cells actually know what to do with. The name of the organelle in your cells, which you've probably heard of, the mitochondria in your cells are the ones that do this job. The mitochondria are going to convert food energy into usable energy. Because the energy within food, the chemical energy that's stored within food, your cells can't directly use it. And so the mitochondria has this process of taking food energy and converting it into usable energy. What is usable energy? Well, your cells are pretty picky in terms of what they can directly use. They have to use a specific molecule that works for them called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. So, energy in food is not usable. It must be converted into ATP. ATP is the cell's, I call it, energy currency. It's what they can actually spend in terms of energy. Cells are able to tap into ATP, use its energy, and do things, including all of the work that they're doing in your body right now. They can't do that with food. They just don't have the ability to do that. Here is an ATP molecule. The TP stands for triphosphate, so those are the phosphates. Right? This molecule, then, is what your cells are using right now. And the energy that's in it ultimately came to it from the food you're eating. So think of it like this. You've got to eat food to continue to recharge the ATP so they can do work for your cells. Or they can provide the energy for your cells to do work. It's a better way of putting it. The name of that whole process that your mitochondria are doing is called cellular respiration. Cellular respiration involves the breakdown of food, releasing the chemical energy of food into these ATP, which your cells can then spend on doing work. Think of it as like a currency transaction, or a currency conversion. Just that we're using energy instead of money. I want to focus on this top line with the idea that energy is not reusable. So, in that first slide, I mentioned the first law of thermodynamics, which is the law of the conservation of energy. Energy is not created or destroyed, which means that you may think, well, energy comes from the sun, then it can't be destroyed, so it should be able to just recycle itself continuously. That's not how it works. It's a one-way thing. So why is it that way? Here's why. Not a very technical word, but I think it's a good one to use. Okay. Energy conversions are what I call sloppy. And here's what I mean by that. Anytime energy changes form, a bunch of it gets lost in the form of heat and is no longer usable. So, energy from the sun converted into the chemical energy in sugar found in a plant. We're going to say a carrot. Carrot is consumed by a rabbit, right? The carrot is consumed by a rabbit, and the energy from the carrot is converted into the metabolism and then tissues of the rabbit, and so it's gone from released by the sun into the tissues of the carrot, tissues of the rabbit. Rabbit gets eaten by a coyote, which I'm not about to try and draw, but then the energy is converted again from the tissues of the rabbit into the coyote's tissues. Energy has gone through a number of conversions here, and every time it does, it loses some available energy. Let me see if I can illustrate that. So, let's do a little bar down here that represents how much energy is usable at each stage. Well, initially, when it's in our carrot, we're going to say that there's a pretty good amount of it that's still usable. As it gets converted into the tissues of the rabbit, a lot less of it is usable. By the time we get to the coyote, there's not much usable energy left. Energy is not destroyed, so what happened? Well, every time that energy changes form, a whole lot of it ends up leaving in the form of heat, which is a type of kinetic energy that is not usable for living organisms. It's not for being a source of energy that their cells can do something with. So every time energy changes form, it's no longer going to have as much available due to a lot of it lost as heat. Think of it this way. If you've got a bucket of water going from one person to the next, if you toss it and the next person catches it and spills a ton of it, that water wasn't destroyed, but it's no longer in the bucket, so they can't, drink it or use it to wash their hands or whatever they want to do with it. And if they chuck it to somebody else, a bunch more of it spills out. By the time you get 2 or 3, 4 people down, there's almost no water left in the bucket. None of it was destroyed, but it's no longer in there to be used. And so, same principle here. Energy conversions result in energy being lost in terms of usability. Let's see. We will come back to that second time. I can figure this out. There we go. Okay, so we already talked about this a little bit. Photosynthesis. So plants convert CO2 into usable energy in the form of sugar. We talked about that. We mentioned that that is photosynthesis and an example of a metabolic pathway. We haven't used that term yet. I'm not too worried about that, but I do want you to be aware of this anabolic reaction term. So down here on the bottom, we've got photosynthesis, 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O converted to glucose and 6 oxygen. Anabolic means energy consuming. So anabolic reactions need an energy source. Because they consume energy, the end product has a lot more energy than what you start with. Okay, so you start with CO2. Chemical energy in CO2 is very low. Chemical energy in sugar is very high, which means we had an increase in stored chemical energy. Energy is not created, had to come from somewhere. In this case, it's the sun. But that is an anabolic reaction. It's building something up due to an influx of energy. Cellular respiration, the breakdown of food, is the opposite of photosynthesis. And so if you look down here, this is cellular respiration. This is what your body's doing right now, breaking down food to release the energy within it. So, in order to harness the energy within sugar, it must be broken down and the stored energy inside it must be released. This is called cellular respiration. Cellular respiration releases energy. It doesn't actually cause an increase in the energy of the product. And so it's the opposite of anabolic. It is said to be catabolic. And so with this one, the initial starting reactant has a lot of energy, and the product has very little. So, decrease in energy, energy is not created or destroyed, which means that energy gets released. And remember, a lot of it gets released as heat, but some of it is released as usable energy. You're warm-blooded, you're an endotherm, which means that the heat that's generated from this breakdown of food is warming up your body to be around 98 degrees Fahrenheit. So here is, again, cellular respiration. Let's just go through what this says. In cellular respiration, glucose, lots of energy, is converted to CO2, very little energy. This results in the release of energy and is called a catabolic reaction. Again, a lot of energy that gets released is lost in the form of heat, but the energy that's usable doesn't go directly to your cells to power them. Instead, the energy that's released from glucose goes into those ATP molecules, which then are used to power your cells. So ATP is pretty darn important, and yeah, ATP is very important. Make sure you understand what it is, that it's the energy currency of the cell, and that your mitochondria in your cells have to convert food energy into ATP before they can use it. Oh, good. We talked about this. We talked about this already. This was that diagram that I showed you, but here's a much prettier picture showing that. So this bar represents usable energy, and another term for usable energy is free energy. So this is the amount of free energy. Plants, the producers, they have a lot of it. Primary consumers eat plants, like this grasshopper here. Notice how much is lost as we go from one trophic or feeding level to the next one. Only 10% remains usable or free. 90% of the energy was lost as heat in that conversion. A mouse eats the grasshopper. We're down to 1% of what we had at the level of producer. Rattlesnake is consuming the mouse. We're down to 0.1%. Every conversion causes a massive loss of usable or free energy. By the way, that's why you see very few top predators. By the time we get to them on the food chain, the amount of usable energy that's available is a lot less than what we have with plants. And it's all because energy conversions are sloppy. A lot of it gets lost as heat when it's converted. That's why we need the sun to keep giving it to us. Okay, enzymes. Enzymes. Enzymes, first of all, are a type of protein. If you remember back, proteins are one of those macromolecules. They're built from repeating chain of amino acids. So they're built from amino acids. Enzymes are involved in the chemical reactions in your body. In order for any chemical reaction to happen, there has to be a certain amount of energy input to get the process started. And the name of that is activation energy. So I like to use the digestive enzymes as an example here because they're one of the easiest to understand. Bread, built from starch, built from a long chain of glucose molecules. If you were to just leave bread out and assume that there's no mold, there's nothing like that that's going to speed up the process, if you were just to let it sit, it would break down very, 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 very slowly. However, when you eat bread, it breaks down in your digestive tract pretty quickly. And that's because you have an enzyme to speed it up. Now, here's how that relates to activation energy. The breakdown of starch requires an activation energy that is so high that it happens really, really, really slowly if you don't have the right enzyme to speed it up. In your digestive tract, and actually even right away in your saliva as you start to chew on starch, you've got a specialized enzyme that lowers the activation energy, speeds up the breakdown of starch to the point where it can all get done within a day or two as it goes through your digestive system. So all chemical reactions, virtually all of them, have this activation energy requirement that's just so high that it's going to be so slow for the reaction to occur that it's not practical within the human body or other living things for it to even be happening in real time. So the enzymes, they're molecules, they're a type of protein that speeds up a chemical reaction by lowering the activation energy to the point where now the reaction can go fast, and that's exactly what we need to happen. Here is an analogy that has helped in the past. So we've got two people going to run some hurdles to try and get to this finish line within the span of 5 seconds. So I want you to visualize this as if they're trying to run to the finish line in a span of 5 seconds. The hurdles represent the activation energy necessary for a chemical reaction. So, this top person, person number 1, their hurdles are this high. Tell you what, we're going to make them even higher. And you can't go around them or under them. You have to go over them. And so this person would have to grab them with their arms, climb on over, and they'd eventually get here, but there's no way they would do it in the span of 5 seconds. The activation energy is just too high for them to be able to complete all of these steps and finish this series of reactions within the time necessary. In this case, it'd be 5 seconds. So it's too slow. Down here, this person has enzymes. So this top person, no enzymes. Bottom person has enzymes. The enzymes lower the activation energy to the point where the hurdles are barely sticking above the ground. As long as the person watches their footwork, speeding over here in 5 seconds shouldn't be an issue. They can make it in that timely manner, no problem. We're going to say that this reaction, or this series of reactions, has to happen in less than 5 seconds in order for it to be useful for your body. And so if you don't have an enzyme, or in this case several enzymes, to lower all of these activation energies, this chemical reaction can't occur. Maybe it's a reaction that's necessary for life, for you to survive. The vast majority of reactions within your body need the enzymes to do this so that they can occur quickly, efficiently, sufficient for you to survive. So, enzymes lower activation energy. That is how reactions occur at a speed necessary for life. Okay, this is better explained by picture, so I'm going to show the picture as we go through it. The enzyme, in this case it's this purple molecule, the enzyme has a specific shape to it. The active site of the enzyme is shaped so that it only fits a particular substrate. Let's say that you consume table sugar, which is called sucrose. Within your digestive tract, you've got a specific enzyme called sucrase that's going to work with it and break it apart in a timely manner. Again, if you were just to leave sugar out without an enzyme, it would eventually break down into its components, but it would take forever because the activation energy is still too high without the enzyme. But if you have sucrase, it's going to make the digestion of sugar nice and quick. So, sucrase has an active site that fits table sugar. Table sugar fits snugly into the active site. The enzyme catalyzes the reaction, it speeds up the breakdown, and we have broken apart our table sugar. Again, this breakdown will happen in real time super slowly. This speeds it up so that it can happen during the time that food passes through your digestive tract. So enzymes speed up chemical reactions. Just to give you an example, another example of an enzyme that is important. If you can digest milk product as an adult, you have the enzyme lactase. So the substrate for the enzyme lactase would be milk sugar, lactose. And if you are able to digest milk as an adult, you have inherited the mutation that keeps lactase production going through your adulthood. Everybody makes this as a baby, but ancestrally it got shut down. The production of lactase got shut down after infancy. But there was a mutation that kept it going into adulthood, which was beneficial, and so now it's really prevalent around the world. So lactase, the enzyme lactase, finds milk sugar and breaks it apart in a timely manner as the dairy products go through your digestive tract. If you do not have lactase, if you are lactose intolerant, you drink milk, you can't break it down, bacteria in your gut may try to break it down. That's part of what causes incredible discomfort and pain. You can't digest it in a timely manner as it travels through your digestive tract because you don't have the enzyme that lowers the activation energy to break apart milk sugar. Okay. Certain molecules prevent enzymes from functioning. These are called inhibitors. You can see up here the two types of inhibitors. You can directly block as a competitive inhibitor, or you can bump into an enzyme, change the shape so that it no longer fits the substrate properly. And that's called a non-competitive inhibitor. I just want to give you some examples of inhibitors. So here's one of them, penicillin. You've probably heard of it. It's an antibiotic, which means that its job is to kill bacteria that are causing some type of bacterial infection within you. How penicillin works is it inhibits the enzyme that builds the cell wall for the bacteria. And so if that enzyme can't build the cell wall, then the bacteria aren't going to survive, and eventually it will kill them using that method. And so penicillin is an enzyme inhibitor that stops bacterial cell wall production. Ibuprofen is an inhibitor that temporarily stops an enzyme that's involved in sending pain signals to the brain. And so that's why ibuprofen can relieve headaches and other body pains. And several insecticides stop the enzyme that insects use for transmitting nerve impulses, which ultimately kills them. And so these are three uses of inhibitors that we've found. Also, most enzymes don't work on their own. They need helping molecules called cofactors. And so you've got the macromolecules, the proteins, the carbs, the fats, but you've got a lot of other nutrients that you need too. And so a lot of nutrients that you need function as cofactors. Obviously, I'm sure you've all heard of vitamins versus minerals. Vitamins are organic, which means they have carbon and hydrogen. Minerals are inorganic. That's the major difference between them. But many of the vitamins and minerals that you need, including vitamin C and B12, riboflavin, niacin, iron, many of the vitamins and minerals that you need are actually cofactors. And so your body produces the enzymes for various functions, but these cofactors you have to get through your diet in order for the enzyme to properly function. Interestingly enough, humans are one of the few species that actually need to get vitamin C from an outside source. Most species, they can synthesize vitamin D themselves, but we cannot. So cofactors, molecules necessary for enzymes to properly function, And again, many vitamins, not all, but many vitamins and minerals function as cofactors.